Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Brian Creamer. I am very warm, so I took the jacket off. It is very warm in here. I apologize about the temperature. Not much we can do at this point, but we're going to bear through it. I'm an adjunct faculty member here at Boston University, and on behalf of Dr. Duda Kohler and the rest of the faculty, we'd like to welcome you to the fall Keynote Lecture for the City Planning and Urban Affairs program. Tonight with us, we have former U.S. Representative Mike Capuano, who has joined the Boston University Initiative on Cities as a Senior Urban Leadership Fellow. Mike has a really interesting career. He was the mayor of Somerville for 10 years, brought a lot of change to the city, brought a lot of positive change to the city of Somerville, and then moved on to become a U.S. House of Representatives member. He had a 20-year career as a member of Congress. He has his Bachelor's of Arts from Dartmouth College and a JD from BC. And as a BU Initiative on Cities Fellow in the third chapter of his career, he's going to be an incredibly valuable resource to the initiative's Metro Bridge program, which is integrating work that's happening in cities throughout Massachusetts with researchers and students at Boston University, both in the city planning program, but really across the university spectrum, getting some really great research done and getting some work, not just in academia, right? Getting work where folks need it the most. During his time in Washington, D.C., Representative Capuano was really passionate about advocating for urban issues, just a couple of his many accolades. He founded 5 congressional caucuses, including one each from former mayors, community health centers, empowerment zones, and enterprise communities. He was also the member of Congressional Progressive Caucus and advocate for single-payer healthcare system. And we are thrilled to have him with us here tonight to talk about the intersection of politics and planning. So, thank you, Mike.
All right. This is not going to be a lecture. The lectures are boring. I'm sorry, professors. I hope it's an interaction. I'm going to throw some things out there, most of which I actually believe, some of which I may not. It'll be up to you to decide what I believe and what I don't, since I no longer really care whether you think I believe it or not. But when I was asked to do this, I said, yeah, sure, fine, happy to do it. We talked about what I was going to talk about, and I said, well, I gave Matthew some ideas, and they came up with this, what was it, engaging communities, which I thought actually is pretty accurate about what I want to talk about. I don't have anything to tell you about city planning. Nothing I can tell you about it. You guys know more about it than everything I know. I can tell you how it interacts with people, the people you're actually planning it for, which is really what it's all about. It's not about you thinking you know what is best for a community. If you think it is, well, take a number. You can be city planner number 4,870, and you will do nothing but divide communities and impose your will on places. And some of that will be good, some of that will be bad. Boston has a long history of city planners, some of which has been good, some of which has been bad. The bad ones are pretty notable. Urban Redevelopment of the West End. I assume they still read that book, Street Corner Society, if I remember correctly. Of the whole book, the only thing that really stuck with me, city planners came in at the time, thought they were helping all these poor people get equitable, and they kicked out, I don't remember the number, 20, 30, 40,000 people who lived in a very densely populated, looked like a poor area to many people who didn't live there. Ethnically diverse, it was a wonderful little community. Came in, wiped it out in the 50s. As it turns out, 30% of the people who lived in that neighborhood went out and bought homes cash on the barrelhead in the 1960s. Proof positive that they were living in that neighborhood because they wanted to. They weren't stuck there. They weren't condemned to that neighborhood. They lived there because they wanted to. And the urban planners didn't care because they thought they had a better vision for that neighborhood. You can make an argument who was right, who was wrong. I think that's horrendously wrong. What are you trying to accomplish as urban planners? If the answer is some textbook vision of any given neighborhood, then I'm going to tell you to stay in academia and stay out of my neighborhood. It's supposed to be about making life better for people who live in different types of places. And if it's not about understanding that different people want different things, then you're not paying attention. I grew up in Somerville, the most densely populated city in New England, at one time the most densely populated city on the face of the earth, because other cities had more open space. They were more densely populated. Look just at Manhattan. Somerville has, and still has, no open space, or virtually none. Yet there were no high-rises, not one. They were all 2- and 3-family homes. It was a poor community. And people would come in from the outside and say, "You poor people, we know what you want." And they'd start doing things, knocking down 2-family houses and building apartment houses that are more affordable. These are affordable. We're all working class people here. We're not rich people. Who are you doing this for? We're fine. Leave us alone. They come in and say, "Well, you need a highway to get back and forth, so we're going to take houses out and put in McGrath Highway. We're going to take houses out, put in Route 93. Leave us alone." They finally get stopped on the inner belt because the world was changing. The community never wanted it. No one asked. Engaging communities. When you go out to be an urban planner, who are you working for? And that's up to you to make that decision. You're going to have conflicts inside your own heart about, are you working for the person who's paying you, or are you trying to make the community better? And if so, how do you meld the two? So if somebody comes in and say, "We're going to go do this type of development," we'll just talk about right here in Calm Ave. We're going to put a bike path in, a dedicated, protected bike lane. Period. Not going to ask anybody how to do it. We're just going to do it. Do you do it simply by going to the book and saying, "Well, we could do this, it's this wide," or do you sit down and talk to the people who actually ride bikes, the people who actually cross the street? Do you actually do a real count? In my lifetime, I've hired dozens of traffic consultants, and I will tell you, they will all give you exactly what you want, which is nice. You hire them, they give you what you want, you pay them, you say thank you, and then you use that information to do exactly what you wanted to do in the first place. Or do you actually go out there and say, "Guess what? 5% of the people who might use this are actually using skateboards. What do we do about them? What do we do about people in wheelchairs? What about the people who are walking across the street? What about people who are going to use this bike lane in a human way?" Everybody's going to follow the rules. No, they're not. You're going to have people going the wrong way. You're going to have people going too fast. Now, you can't plan for everything, but you need to take it into consideration. How do you deal with it? That's your problem. But to pretend that somehow, here's what the book says, bike lane needs to be 4 feet wide, we have to have 2 feet for open cars, and you end up with a car lane that's only 2 feet wide. Don't be surprised when doors start getting ripped off of parked cars, and people start getting hurt getting in and out of those automobiles because somebody's going 40 miles an hour trying to get in front of a bike, and they didn't know that you were opening your car door. Now, again, I don't know the answers. That's your problem. But if you don't ask those questions before you do it, you've created almost as many different problems than you solved. It happens all the time. And on top of that, when you do it, I cannot think of one instance in Greater Boston where I saw a city planner say, "Let's try this for a while, and if it doesn't work, we'll reverse it." Now, maybe it's happened. I'm not aware of it. Let's change the traffic pattern. Let's make sure we can build more houses. Let's put more units here. Excuse me. What if it doesn't work? Oh, well, then we have to do another whole series of planning, and guys, relax. Take a deep breath. Engage the community before the changes happen, before you even decide what the changes will be. Here's part of the problem. I think one of the biggest problems in any planning endeavor, everybody wants to have a task force. We're going to do this project, whatever it is. Rezone, build something, you name it. Let's have a task force. Good. Great, wonderful people. Every week you have a meeting of the task force. 20 people show up, 30 people, 100 people show up every week. And they all have very active involvement. At the end of the process, you're now about to implement $1 million, $10 million, $100 million change to the community. How many people have you heard from? 100? 100 people in a neighborhood that might have 10,000. Are you going to tell me in your mind that those 100 people who have taken the time and trouble and the energy to volunteer their time and come and tell you what they want, are they the only people in the community whose opinion matters? What about the 9,900 others who either weren't interested or had to work or didn't know about the meetings or have little kids, they can't go out at night, whatever the reasons are, or they had to do Pilates? Whatever the reason is, are you going to tell me their opinion on a major change that you're about to make in their community no longer matters because I did 45 community meetings and you never came? That's your opinion? You're in a democratic society here, guys. You can't go to the ballot and everything, but aren't your opinions supposed to matter? Want me to name a dozen things that you guys haven't been involved in, that if that theory holds water, that your opinion doesn't matter on? Opinions matter. And as a planner, I think you have an obligation to do more than the easy, low-hanging fruit. I'm not saying not to have the task forces. They bring up a lot of good things. And I'm not saying not to listen to their opinion. But how about go test their opinion? Do people in the neighborhood really want this? Before you make a decision. Now, if you want to make a decision and then advocate it, still go out and do it. How about knocking on a few doors? God forbid you get up from behind the desks, away from the computers, off of the study stuff that people create, the polling and the surveying, and go talk to some people. If you're going to change a traffic pattern, how about standing outside yourself for a couple of days a week? Just stand there. Watch. What's the light cycle really do? Not what the planner said it was going to do. Are they right? Do you agree with the traffic numbers? And if they're wrong, I'm not saying you have to change it, but maybe question it. I cannot tell you how many times, and I've been driving this city all my life. I'm one of those guys, I hate sitting in traffic. I hate it. I would rather take just as much time driving around every one of your back streets than sitting in traffic for the same 20 minutes. Okay, what does that mean? It means whether I save time or not, I know your back streets. And I'm driving down your back streets. And by the way, I used to be alone. Waze has now allowed you to all do that, which I hate, because now you're on the streets that I was using. And now you're all on those streets. Oh, that doesn't matter. The traffic's going to, of course traffic's going to move. And I know there are a lot of people today that think, oh, traffic's going to go away. Really? Anybody have any idea how many automobiles are registered in the city of Boston? I don't, but maybe one of you would. I know the official number is a ton. And I'm willing to bet my house that it is as many or more than there was 10 years ago. And I know, oh, no one's using automobiles anymore. Have you been out there? Can you not see with your own eyes? And now, if you want to say, we're going to do social engineering, we're going to do social justice, and we're going to then make it almost impossible for an automobile to go anywhere because we don't think anybody should be in their automobiles, you're entitled to that opinion. Say it. Don't lie. Don't cheat, because no one's going to believe you. The minute you say it, the minute your credibility goes through the floor. The minute your credibility goes through the floor, you're wasting your time on everything. You want to be a planner? People need to understand, they have to trust that you will listen to their opinion. Not that you will agree, but that you will honestly listen and be a fair arbiter about different issues, and that you will not impose your will. I can't tell you how many times I've been to planners and asked, how long have you lived here? The answer is, of course, you can't live in every neighborhood. It's an unfair question, but it's a fair question. How long have you lived? What community do you come from? I have chosen all my life to live in the city of Somerville because I like it. I like city life. My wife likes city life. She's the one who vetoed us moving to the suburbs when we were supposed to move to the suburbs, which thankfully she did. Doesn't mean you like it, but I will tell you The thing that drives people crazy and that drives communities, particularly city, because you're not doing this planning in Concord. And if you are, you're planning what color flowers you're going to plant downtown. You're not planning a 20-story building or rezoning. You know, we're going to do pink flowers this year. In cities, you're coming up with housing and everything else. Let's talk about for a minute. I did a speech, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe more. Good friend of mine, Earl Blumenauer from Northwest. Real big biker. He's the head of the bike caucus and real big on smart growth. So he asked me to speak. I said, Earl, you're making a mistake. He said, why? I said, you'll find out. I asked everybody where all the people who were in favor of smart growth, where they came from. Not one of them came from an urban area. Here's my definition of smart growth. I'm all for it. Transit-oriented development, all for it. That's the new term. You don't use the term smart growth anymore. I haven't heard it in a long time. I'm all for it. But why is it that every time anybody talks about transit-oriented development, it's in the cities? I never hear the term transit-oriented development applied to the downtown commuter rail station in Concord. Never. So we're supposed to take care of all the ills of society in an already dense community that already has all the problems of society, when some leafy little suburb who gets just as much commuter rail service as we do, actually more, some of them to this day has no commuter rail stops. Yet every single commuter line from north of Boston comes through the city. But we're supposed to do more than those suburbs who won't do anything about affordable housing. Who then, when they have a parking lot next to their transit-oriented area, refuse to let anybody other than residents of their cute little community park there. It's like, here's my answer. You want it here? Impose it here. Both. The problems you're trying to solve with transit-oriented development and smart growth are not problems unique to urban areas. Nor should urban areas be expected to solve all the problems of society. Guess what? There are poor people in suburbs. Actually, there aren't, because they can't afford to move there. And yet you want me to now live in a city that has 40-story high-rises. If I wanted that, I would have moved to New York. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not the neighborhood I wanted to live in. I like cities. That's not what I want. I liked what I had. You want bike paths? Great. Absolutely. That make cars illegal, immoral, unethical? And if it does, it's okay. You're welcome to that opinion. I think you have an obligation to be honest about it. So our presidential debate last night, Bernie Sanders got credit for being honest about what his opinion was. Elizabeth Warren got knocked around pretty good because she refused to tell her opinion. Be honest about it. Now, I won't agree with that, and some people won't. Some people will. You're supposed to be not imposing your will. Social justice, talk to the people who live in the neighborhoods when you use that term, who have to live with these issues. I laugh. I just went to my latest community meeting the other day, and it's on a bus lane that was just put into Somerville. Anybody familiar with Somerville? They just put a bus lane only on Broadway. It's a half a mile long, not 2, not 3, a half a mile long, and it does not terminate at a subway stop. It goes from one highway, and it kind of just stops. That's it. It might increase the traffic flow for buses and bikes, maybe, not for bikes, but for buses, maybe a minute or 2 in that half-mile distance. And you know why it was done? Pollution. Let's clean this air. I got my coat over there. I'll show you. I've had asthma since I was 3. You want to talk clean air to me? How do you think I got asthma? And yet, now in my neighborhood, where the buses are zipping by, every automobile on that street is now taking 10 minutes longer to go that same half-mile distance. And they're all idling. They're not shutting their engines off. They're not electric vehicles just yet. The pollution in my neighborhood has gone through the roof. And yet, you know who cares about it? Nobody. Because they have this vision of we got to do something to move people faster, which everybody agrees with. Nobody argues with that. But not everybody's on a bus. and the cars haven't disappeared. So that I don't know the right answer. There may not be one. But to pretend you're cleaning the environment, maybe you are a little bit for the greater good of the global community, but you're killing people in my neighborhood faster. And if you live there, you're entitled to that opinion. Are you entitled to that opinion if you're killing me and my children? I have a little problem with that. Does that make me a bad person? Because I want clean air just like you do in your leafy little suburbs? I don't think that makes me a bad person. It means let's try to work this out. Let's see if we can come up with a compromise. Oh no, we can't do that. You know why? The book says we have to have bus-only lanes. What book? Who wrote the damn book? Nobody has cars anymore, right? Where'd that number come from? Now, I know this is probably not the room to ask how many people have cars. You're all too young. But you will. Now, maybe you won't have. I hope you don't all go out and buy Humvees and drive around in circles and pollute my air. And if you do, I don't want you next to the bus lane because you'll be polluting me even more. But you're going to have a car. Most of you will. You may not use it much. Good. That's why we're doing things like expanding subways and the like. But it's awfully hard to expand a subway when to go 4 miles, it's a $2 billion project. And that's without a tunnel. That's what it costs. $2 billion to go a little bit over, I think it's about 4 miles. Doesn't mean it's not worth it. It just means let's get real, guys. You're not going to be able to do that everywhere. And if you can, where's the money coming from? And I don't know the answer. You don't know the answer. As you're planning, take into consideration the impacts of the changes you're proposing. The real impacts, beyond what the books say. Half these books are written by advocates. And God bless them. There's nothing wrong with being an advocate, but an advocate doesn't tell you the whole story. They tell you, well, we're going to move these buses faster and we're going to get 30% of the people. Well, in this case, they're moving a minute faster, causing more pollution. Simple little question. Wherever you come from, every place I know now has more places where an automobile going 25 miles an hour has to stop for anybody who even looks at a crosswalk. Am I wrong? Anybody coming from town that doesn't have that? Again, environmentalist, I ask you, what causes more pollution? A pedestrian waiting 2 minutes to cross the street, or an idling automobile, or more importantly, a series of idling automobiles waiting to let that pedestrian cross the street? Which causes more pollution? Is this a hard question? No. Who takes that into consideration when they plop those signs right in the middle of a town? Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm saying, again, take it into consideration. Okay, Mike, it's worth it. Safety is important. In this particular neighborhood, we need to get pedestrians across the street more efficiently and more quickly, and we're willing to live with the pollution. Okay, that's a fair answer. I mean, whether you agree or not, it's a different point. It's a fair and honest answer. But you can't then say, I'm an environmentalist. Which is it? And the answer is, on everything you decide will be a balance of competing interests. And not competing interests by different people, sometimes within yourself, your own set of values. I am an environmentalist. I do want people walking across the street safely. How do I balance the two? The answer is you're never going to get it right because there's no way to balance it. People and cars don't go together. Kind of simple. You're going to have some degree of pollution and some degree of delay for the pedestrians. What it is, you've got to make a decision, and each community does. And you probably have to make that decision differently in this part of the community than that part of the community. There are more pedestrians here, this neighborhood likes that. All of that's good. I never have heard that in 45 years of getting involved with planners. I've never heard any of those kinds of discussions. And that's maddening. Why? Because they're difficult decisions. They're difficult conversations. And there is no straight answer. Somebody has to make that decision. If you want to sit there and say, okay, I've been hired to do this, it's my responsibility, I've made the decision to do this, fair enough. But did somebody anoint you with all the answers? Is that what you get out of this school, an anointment? If you do, I'm coming. For me, engaging communities means actually, honest to God, engaging them. Before the decision is made, not just to inform them after the fact, not to preach to them saying, well, I have a great degree, I know everything there is to know. I got several degrees. It doesn't mean I know everything. And even then, the stuff I know doesn't necessarily apply to every situation. If you've done any planning at all, you'll know that every situation is a little different. Listen to people in the neighborhood. And again, doesn't mean they control the process. And listen to everyone. It is unequivocal that when you have task forces or any kind of community involvement, the average age of the participants is significantly lower than whatever the average age is of the community that's being impacted. Why? Young people are active. Old guys like me say, I don't feel like going out tonight. I'm too old, I gotta watch a football game. You know? And again, you make the decision. If you really feel that self-appointed and self-anointed with everything, then don't complain to me about guys like Donald Trump. It's exactly how he feels. And it's wrong. Not because, it's not even saying the decision is wrong, it's a bad attitude in government. It's a bad attitude by those who work for government. And it's what drives the public away from social interaction. They don't think their voices are going to be heard. They are oftentimes not heard. And they just give up. Now, that means if they give up, you win. Good for you. You better hope you win all the time. Because the time will happen to you that you won't like it. And you won't feel good about it. And for me, I don't understand anybody who doesn't respect the opinion of other people, even when you don't agree with. So, that's engaging communities to me. I got millions of stories to tell you about it. Most of them are unpleasant, because you don't remember the pleasant ones. The unpleasant ones are always more memorable. And with that, I think I'm going to stop and kind of see where you want to go. Like I said, I think I actually lectured longer than I want, but you give me a reel, we go. So we're going to stop and see where you want to go. Ta-da. Now clap if you agree with me.
If anybody has a question, please use the mic.
I'm pretty loud too, though. Thank you, sir. You touch on a really interesting and important issue, I think, is how to get genuine engagement from the community. And any of us who have been involved in those kind of processes understand the frustration of how to reach people, how to motivate them to get involved. From your experience, what are some of the most effective ways to generate that sort of real engagement?
Part of the problem in today's world is people think everybody else is tweeting and Facebooking and all that stuff, and I'm here to tell you that's not the case. And for those of you who are obsessed with it, you have my deepest sympathies. As far as I'm concerned, you've given up most of your life for what? To hear somebody else's brain fart in 200 characters? Your choice, but get up. Go see people. Do all the things you do now, you know, the mailings and the emails and the postings, that's all good stuff. But eventually get up. Go talk to people. Get out. Go knock on a door. It's not so hard. Hi, I'm Mike Capuano. I'm here from the planning department. There's some discussion about doing a bus lane in your neighborhood. I wanted to get your opinion on it. What do you think? This is what we're thinking. This is how we're thinking. You can't do everybody. It takes too long. And by the way, we're having a community meeting in your neighborhood. You do the community meeting. Don't wait for somebody else. We're going to do one right here. But would you do it in your house? Would you get 10 of your neighbors to your house over here, and we'll come back Tuesday, and we'll do it? And if they say no, they have been offered. You came to them, you offered them. As opposed to, well, we sent out a blast email and you didn't respond. You guys read every one of the emails you get? Again, my sympathies if you do. I mean, I try to read the headlines and then it's quick delete. You know, especially if I don't know it. Like, you know, who's this guy? You know, what are they trying to sell me this time? Do you read every posting? Are you involved in York City's website? And are you, I have to be honest, I'm older than pretty much everybody here. I'm not gung-ho about giving the government my email address. I know they have it, but I don't like giving it to them. Yeah, and so for me, unless you're coming to my door, I'm probably going to ignore you. I think I'm pretty involved. You know, the reason I went to one the other day, one of my neighbors was interested in a zoning matter. They took the city's leaflet, reproduced it themselves, and dropped it at our house. You get one person in the neighborhood who's willing to do that, now go have a meeting with them before you make the announcements. If you do it afterwards, you're going to get screamed at, and you're going to sit there. You won't admit it, but you're going to go home and say, Jesus, I wish I had thought of that beforehand. How come I didn't talk to this guy before? He's a pain in the ass. Avoid the problems. And again, unless you have a specific vested interest. Oh, Brandon Wilson. Brandon worked with me in the city. She was a fantastic asset relative to city planning. I love her. I didn't know you were going to be here. So for me, you do it beforehand. Listening to the community matters, and it's hard. It's not easy work. And it is not what you're going to be taught in school, I assume. I don't know that. But again, if you want to apply everything you're being taught, you got to apply it in a way that works for the people that you're trying to help. And you can't know their opinions. And many of them may not have it. But what does it hurt to ask? And God forbid you go out with an idea saying, I want to do a bus lane, and you find out 80% of people don't want it. Okay, you wasted some time. So what? If I ever stopped and counted up all the hours I have wasted in my life making arguments on stuff I didn't get, or even thinking about stuff I couldn't get, even stuff I thought I was going to get, no progress is made without wasted time. Now, it's not intentionally. I'm not sitting here playing Nintendo or whatever the hell games you guys play now. I don't even know how to play Nintendo. I just know the name. Yeah, I actually play pool on my phone. But it matters. And honestly, I personally think you'll feel more fulfilled if you know you've got the community support than if you don't. And you won't have any fights. And Brandon knows in 10 years, I don't think I had a single real serious community fight with these issues. Some differences of opinion on occasion, but everybody thought they were heard, and most people won everything. Not always, because there are things you have to impose on communities on occasion. But even then, people, they didn't like it, but at least they didn't look for the good of the city. We can't do what you want on your street. Okay. But, all right, so the answer is it's uncomfortable. It is not natural to some people. But once you start doing it, I will tell you that for me, one of the biggest pleasures I've ever had in my life is getting to know people that I didn't know. I'm not talking about marrying them and, having coffee with them once a week. 15 minutes of engagement at their door, inviting them into your world. They'll appreciate it. And they will give you a lot more leeway than you have otherwise. Otherwise, you're just walking in as a stranger who's trying to impose your will on their neighbors, on their neighborhood, and we're not going to like it no matter what. Oh, come on, have some fun.
Thank you. All right, so when you're talking about the beautiful democracy that we live in and participation of the community, I thought immediately to the Green Line extension through Somerville, that the greater Boston area was broadly not in favor of it, but the residents of Somerville really were. How can you reconcile those two facts, especially when the state is the one paying for it?
The greater Boston, nobody opposed it. It's just, different people have different priorities. And the priority is always what's good for my neighborhood, not yours. That's natural. And what you do is you try to make sure that everybody feels that they get something. And, for the sake of discussion, when I went to Congress, the biggest fights I had on the Transportation Committee when I first got elected were all the members of Congress saying, you already got yours, you got the big dig. You don't deserve any more money. It was a tough argument to make. It's like, no, that's just not the case, you know. We got ours, and now we need regular. We're not asking for more, we're asking for just regular. And yet, by the way, I know there will be other projects of national significance that we won't get. As we speak right now, the most expensive project in the country that I'm aware of is a tunnel from New Jersey to New York that keeps starting and stopping, and I don't even know where it is now. We're not getting any of that technically, but we are. There's a subway line going on in Hawaii right now. It's, again, fits and starts. The last I know was down again. I don't really know. The answer is you're going to get yours eventually. And if it's local, start naming the project. What do you want in your neighborhood that we can do? Can we bring a subway stop right to your house? Probably not, you know. But maybe we can. Maybe we can improve the line that you're on. Maybe we can make the buses a little bit faster, maybe a little bit cleaner. Whatever. What is it that your neighborhood needs that's an actual achievable goal? And we'll talk about it. And if you get some ideas, we'll help. And you know, if the answer is you don't have any, then what are you complaining about? So you don't want anybody to get anything because you don't get anything. That's really, thank you very much for your input. Next. And so I never had too much problems here, except some people say, well, you know, we want some too. Well, okay. We did the Fairmount line. We did Ruggles Station. You know, we've done a lot of stuff. We did the whole Silver Line. The whole Silver Line. You know, it didn't exist. It exists now, and it's working reasonably well, as best it can. You know, but I actually remember when those bus lanes, which the street is wide enough to accommodate, they weren't enforced. Well, because a bus lane that wasn't enforced. And by the way, those bus lanes still go downtown. Anybody ever ride the Silver Line? Works great on Washington Street. How's it work in Chinatown? Yeah. And again, maybe if you have any ideas, we're happy to listen. But here's what I will tell you that I think was hilarious. Cost me politically dearly. But Silver Line was supposed to be a one-seat connection from Roxbury, which is predominantly African-American, to the seaport, which is where the new set of new big jobs are going to be. And the whole idea was some sort of social justice, giving people with economic distress a better access to the jobs. One seat, not switching and moving. You can't get there from here. And again, if it's a Silver Line, that's what it is. First of all, some people wanted the Orange Line replaced with a fixed rail. You can't do it. We moved the Orange Line. The old Orange Line was elevated. We're not doing any more elevators. Can't do it. Not going to happen. So what's next? Next thing is a rapid bus transit, bus rapid transit. Okay, you have it. First of all, you got to enforce it. And by the way, once you get down to Chinatown, you got to go underground to South Station. That was the original plan. Now, this is right after the big dig, so the tunnel that they would propose was $1 billion tunnel. But here are the ones that I really laughed at. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an urban planner. The engineers, I said, look, where's the best place to put a tunnel? MBTA comes up with a proposal. Anybody know where the round, I think it's closed now. There's a round church right near Chinatown. It's I don't even know what the name of it is, but it's pretty obvious landmark. Right there, Charles Street South, I think it is by that time, it's pretty wide, and they decided the best place to do was put a portal there and go up Charles Street and take a right on Boylston past Emerson, right down Boylston to South Station. I'm not an engineer. I don't know. I said, all right, fine. People in Bay Village were apoplectic. Like, why? I mean, you already got this Charles Street South that's 47 lanes wide. You know, you take your life in your hand crossing it as it is, and we're going to actually make it safer because we're going to, you know, you're going to, don't want it. It's a promise we made to the poor African-American community for some sort of equitable justice who had their Orange Line moved a half a mile away. And we told them they were going to have one-seat access to their jobs. It's the right thing to do. Nope, can't do it. The Boston Common people came, and because they had to go, if you know the Boston Common, right there in front of Emerson, there is an old cemetery. You can't touch the Common. What do you mean you can't touch the Common? It's historical, it's beautiful, we're friends of the Common. I like the Common, I don't want to touch the Common. But we might have to dig it up for a bit and move some dead people, and we'll move them back. We promise we'll move them back. We'll make sure their headstones are nice and straight, but they're dead. Can't do it. Can't touch the Common. How the hell would the Green Line have ever been built in today's world? or the red line or the orange line or any of the things you have or any place else, if you say you can't touch this, you can't touch that, and guess what? They won. There is no tunnel today. People of Dudley Square still have to now take a 2-seat ride through downtown Chinatown, which again, the traffic is impossible. The promise was broken. They won. Classic example of people with a voice defeating people without a voice. The urban planners are the ones who came up with that plan, and the engineers together. They were nowhere to be seen when the fight started. So I got my head into me. The Bay Village hates me to this day. And I don't care. It was the right thing to do. But I told them the truth, didn't lie to them. Said, look, I understand that, but these buses are already coming through your neighborhood. And guess what? The black people won't stop and harass you. They just want to go to work. They didn't like that when I said that. But I actually thought there was a fair amount of racism to it, my opinion, but so be it. Anyway, so I don't even know why I told you the story, except it's a good story. Anybody live in Bay Village?
So it seems to me a lot of what you're saying comes down to a question of pure democracy versus representative democracy. And isn't there a role for city planners to do something that's good for the city? And I'll use the Somerville example. I had the pleasure of living across the street from you 30 years ago, and I rented. And I moved to Cedar Street 5 years ago, new development. And there's a garage behind us that's being knocked down to build residences. And with the Green Line coming in, I think they should build that thing to the sky. And all my neighbors said, oh no, you can't, we can't lose our sunlight. Don't build it too high. And I think in a representative democracy, you elect people to make choices that are good for the city. And if the residents of the city don't like that, they can vote for someone else next time.
I think there's a place for both. And that I'm not talking about anything other than representative democracy, but the word representative means something. It's a word, it's not just a title. And the title comes from the word representing the people that elected you. That means their opinion should matter. Doesn't mean it should be self-determined. And if you disagree with them, I think that's perfectly fine to say, I really respect you and I know I'm the minority, but you elected me and I'm going to respectfully disagree. That's okay. But to not ask their opinion is not okay. And to lie about you not, or to try to sneak around it, whatever it is. And I've done both. I've been on the community side, I've been on the elected side, and I've had people lie to me, and I've told people the truth. Like I just told about Bay Village. I can actually tell you one about Linden Ave, the very first one I ever did. A street over from where I knew everybody in the street. Then wanted to change it into a one-way street. I said, I love you, no. Because it would just move the traffic off to another street. And I know you have too much traffic, but it's Somerville. Everybody has too much traffic. Get over it. You're not going to make your problems easier when everybody else's problems are worse. I didn't lose any votes for it because I was on it. I respected their opinion. I didn't get angry about it. So I don't think they're in opposition at all. I just don't. I actually think it's arrogant and insulting to say you elected me, now sit down and shut up. I've been an elected official a long time, and I've argued with a lot of people, probably you too, Mark, on occasion. And that's okay, But to say that your opinion, I don't have to listen to your opinion, I don't even ask your opinion, I find that to me is anathema. And if you don't agree, you don't agree. That's okay. But if you don't ask, no, I elected you. I didn't anoint you. What's the problem? Why are you afraid of us? Why are you afraid to hear different opinions? Why are you afraid of the people that elected you? So I don't think it's, and again, that's a tough balance. Always, on many issues, you have to make a decision what you think is right versus, and half these things, honestly, on a moral issue, abortion, you might put your personal beliefs ahead of what you think your constituents might want. Traffic and planning, that's a moral issue? Zoning is a moral issue? Come on. I mean, you must have a moral issue about what kind of peanut butter you eat. Which is fine. If you do, I guess I respect it, but I find it strange. So the height of a building, You're welcome to your opinion, your neighbors are welcome to their opinion. You're both right. Somebody has to make a decision. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. But I'm not going to lose any sleep about the morality of the issue. I may not like the answer, and I might move out of the neighborhood. But I don't see it as a moral issue. What else?
Hey, good evening. Question. So in Boston, we having more and more developers come in, build new luxury apartments, all types of things. So how do you balance the investments? Because clearly they're pumping a lot of money into the city that boosts the economy. But how do you balance the investors and developers against the residents who may be losing housing and different things?
It's a really hard question, and there's no answer to it. It's one of the questions of the ages, and every city will deal with it differently. I can only tell you what we did in different cities. Boston's a little different. Somerville's a smaller city, but in Somerville, we had inclusionary zoning. We were one of the first cities around. Might have been the first city around, maybe second, I don't remember. We had inclusionary zoning and required a certain amount of affordable units to be built whenever you built the unit. But we also refused to allow them to do it off-site. The idea being, poor people shouldn't live over there and everybody else over here. The idea is you gotta bring people there. So there was not one instance that I can recall that we let anybody fulfill their obligations off-site. That's my preference. Other cities have different preferences. I would argue that that's a community decision to make, the city's decision to make. At the same time, I laugh. We made a lot of changes in Somerville. To my knowledge, at the time, I never thought any of them were bad. I don't remember one that I thought at the time was a bad decision. In hindsight, I'm not so sure that the ones we made were bad, but things happened that I didn't foresee. I never thought I would live to see the day that people would fight to live in Somerville. I grew up in a city where people fought to get out. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. The measure of success in my entire generation was how quick you could move out, move to Chelmsford. And now people are fighting to get in. Didn't foresee that. The fights we made, the changes we made to make the city a more attractive place, Boston, Cambridge, all these places, were done for the people that were there, the working class people that were there. And then all of a sudden somebody came in and said, hey, this is pretty nice. We need to move there, and we'll be willing to pay more than anybody else. Like, well, that's nice, the first couple of people that do that. It's very nice. They used to call Somerville Slummerville. And all of a sudden they don't anymore. It's like, well, that's the first. All of a sudden you realize, oh, geez, I didn't realize 10,000 people just did this. And again, none of them are doing anything wrong, but they just took 10,000 working class people that we fought for that cannot afford to stay there anymore and shoved them out. I don't know how to balance that. I mean, I think some of the answers, some people like rent control. I actually think it's more of a zoning issue, and I would actually argue condo control was more important than rent control, personally. And I say that because what ended up happening, the economics of the situation, which I did not foresee, and I don't think much of it happened while I was in office, at that office. And I encouraged people when I left to revisit condo conversion. And I want to make it clear, I think there's a good and serious and important place for condos in this society. It's a great way for some people to enter the housing market. But I don't think that they're appropriate for 2- and 3-family homes. Number one, you get a 2-family home and you have a condo and you don't agree with your condo resident, then the house doesn't get painted, or it gets painted 2 tones. Yeah. And number one, it just doesn't work. Condos work with larger buildings. And number two, people forget what 2- and 3-family homes were all about. They were the affordable way for working people to get into the housing market. I own a 2-family house. Brandon owns a 2-family house. I own one because I needed the rent to help pay the mortgage. Simple. And by the way, I have never had a subsidized tenant. My unit has always been below market rate. You know why? I live there. I don't want 45 BU students living upstairs. Why? Because I used to be one. And I wouldn't want me living upstairs at that age. I want adults. I don't want people that understand you don't be partying at 2 o'clock in the morning in my home. And when you get an owner-occupied, owner-occupied, very clear distinction. Owner-occupied multifamily unit, you'll find that that's almost always true. You have a stable community with reasonable to affordable rents, which is why you have long-term tenants. It's awfully hard. I've been there. I can't tell you to say this. It's one thing for me to say to you, I never met you, yeah, $5,000 for that unit. I couldn't care less what you do. Now it's my house. You've lived there for a year, 2 years. I know you. You took the trash out a couple times. You helped me shovel. You helped me push my car out of a snowbank. You helped me catch the dog when he got off the leash. Whatever it was, it's not the same thing. No, forget it. No rent increase this year. Not a big deal. That's across the board. That's not me. That's the difference between an owner-occupied vested interest as opposed to a simple commercial interest. Now, that doesn't make the commercial interest bad. And by the way, when you take 2s and 3s out of the mix, at least in Boston, you've now prevented working class people from ever getting into the housing market and from ever being able to provide those affordable rental units. I'm sorry. I think that it's the worst thing that's happened in Greater Boston when it comes to affordable units. You can build all the affordable units you want. You're not going to build your way out of the problems we have. And you're certainly not going to build your way out of it just on Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, and a few other communities. Not possible. Not possible. And if you don't believe me, take a look at the numbers. Is housing more affordable now than it was 20 years ago? Yet every one of those cities has inclusionary zoning, affordable requirements, good transportation, all the other things we're supposed to have to help the people we're talking about helping, yet can't keep up. Cambridge is the best example. When I grew up, Cambridge was a working class community. Today, you get two kinds of people in Cambridge. Very, very rich and subsidized. There's virtually no middle class left because you can't afford it. The numbers don't work. Again, there's exceptions to every rule, but that's, it happened in Somerville, it happened in Charlestown, it's happening in Dorchester and Roxbury as we speak. JP, I hope you guys know some of these neighborhoods. If you don't believe me, we'll take you there. They're not far from there. Actually, Brighton's a little different because Brighton, Alston is, I will tell you, Alston is pretty much this way. So, the problem you address is a critical one. I don't have any wonderful answers for you. And especially when you get to a place like Boston where you have a downtown, which a lot of the luxury units are being built in places that there was no housing. It's a little different to me. But I do think that it's different when it reaches Charlestown, when it reaches Dudley. Now you get neighborhoods, long-term residents, real solid neighborhoods that at the time, whatever the time was, needed a little help. And having people with some disposable income is a good thing. Finding that balance has been elusive. I think we need to struggle it. I'm positive the answer is not just requiring more affordable units and everything else, because again, it's better than nothing, but it's not going to help keep those neighborhoods in the place you want them to be, if you want them to be there, not the place I want them to be. So I wish I had a better answer, because I've been struggling with that for a long time. I don't know if you get to ask a question, Brandon. Brandon was what, planning director? Was that your title?
Yeah, I'm no longer planning director, but Historic Preservation Commission director. Knowing our history together and such, just as a comment, the condo conversion ordinance has actually been updated as of August 23rd of this year, so that just precisely to deal with what you're just pointing out, which is so true about the 2- and 3-family houses, so that it's going to make it much more difficult for developers to convert them.
Good.
So it's actually been challenged, no big surprise.
It'll get beat in court because I assume you guys want to hear legal issues? I assume you don't, but the condo conversion ordinance that we had was repealed effectively when they went to the ballot to repeal rent control. That was a decision by the courts.
Right. Well,
And
now it's now under a state statute, another statute.
They
which
had
has
another
more,
statute? Oh,
yes,
good. I
exactly.
didn't know
So
that.
it's a chapter 527 or something in
Okay,
the
good.
state. So it has more legitimacy and
All right.
such. The judge is actually looking at now. But I'm also curious about the follow up on the question before about balancing different types of issues. And one of the ones is transportation right now. It seems to be certainly in Somerville, but I know it's not just limited to Somerville. And that is this whole idea that planners, myself included, think about the fact that we have to reduce car usership over because of the.
You
but
got here late.
okay, then I apologize for that. So did you already talk about, because as you become much more involved in transportation,
Yeah, I
the
did.
balance between older people who we want to keep in the cities and keep in their homes and just to stay around.
It's
and
not going to happen. You won't be able to balance it. You're going to chase older people out, number one.
Exactly.
Number two, we talked about it. That bus lane is in my neighborhood. And the pollution in my neighborhood is now worse than it was. And it's worse not because of the buses, but because of the cars now stuck in traffic and idling that they never used to do. The traffic back up on Winter Hill every day, morning and afternoon, is horrendous.
Right.
And and people want to talk about the need to get people out of their cars. No one has left their car yet. Now, if the idea is to make it so horrendous to travel by automobile, then I think that's okay. Say it publicly. Let the elected officials say it. And if that's what the people of Somerville or any other city want, good, fine. No one has said that except a handful of people in a very back, quiet room who haven't got the courage to say it publicly because they'll get crucified. Or maybe they won't. I might be wrong. Somerville's changed a lot. And if that's what people want, that's what they should get. And if that's the case, why don't you just shut down Broadway? That'll get people out of their cars. Now, what it'll do, it'll also reduce property values, and you'll have nobody over the age of 40. I'm 67 years old. I'm not getting on a bike now, guys. Actually, I like bikes. But I'm not riding one to commute to work. Why? I don't know how you guys do it. I sweat. Yeah. And by the way, just as a point of information, when I was significantly younger, I did try to bike to downtown. I worked downtown, couldn't do it because I had no place to shower at the time. So I bought a moped. This was 1980? 1980. None of you were born, none. Most of you weren't born in 1980. I was driving a moped. And you know what? I was the only person driving a moped at that time that I saw. And I drive in a suit. Why did I drive a moped? It was cheap, it was fast, it was efficient, it was clean. I got 70, 80 miles a gallon. And I didn't sweat when I got to work. So it can be done, but I was 35, 40 years old, whatever I was.
Well, the reason I asked the question is because we need to do something. I think you will agree with that. And I think your thinking has changed over the years dramatically about a lot of other transportation issues, including the Green Line extension, which at one point I know you were quite concerned that by having that extended into Somerville, it was going to bring a lot of new people, a lot of students in particular, into Somerville, and that was going to ruin the quality of life there. We're past that point, and I'm sure you are as well. You fought very hard in order to make sure that we got the money to do it. So clearly your thoughts have changed on that. But in looking toward the future and sustainable living, we can't have the kind of car ownership and usage that we do now. So
I
it's a
understand
balancing.
That is an arrogant attitude to a certain extent. I know you have a car.
I
And
use
I
it.
know you use it.
I do use it. In fact, I
And,
use it
and
to
I'm
get
not
here.
arguing that you're not right, but you are wrong to impose that on the average person without having them participate in the discussion on how to address it.
Okay.
And for me, that's been the problem, is the arrogance of the people. We all agree with the problem, but it's the arrogance of the people who think they have a solution that they are willing to impose on others without caring about the consequences to others and without engaging them in the discussion about a solution. That's the problem. And if the community comes together and says, you know what, we agree. We need to get rid of all the cars in the city. We're going to get rid of all parking spaces. We're going to do whatever it is we're going to do. Fine. I think that's the way democracy is supposed to work. I don't think democracy is supposed to work that somebody in a room decides that's the right answer and let's impose it on the people whether they like it or not. I don't. I think it should be, here's our idea, and here's why we think it, and here's what we think we should do about it. What do you think? You who have to live with the consequences. And I will tell you that in this particular case, I'm thinking about moving. And that's fine. I'll make a fortune on my house. I've owned it since 1980. I'm going to be a millionaire, guys. But I'm moving for reasons that are not fair. We had a community meeting the other day, 3 people in the neighborhood. 1 senior, 1 woman with 3 children on Browning Road, publicly said they're thinking about moving. Now, I'm not saying that that's wrong. I don't think that's a problem if that's the desire of the city administration. And if that's the desire of the city administration and they get reelected, so be it. That's okay. But that's not why the Green Line was brought in. It wasn't brought in order to impose some will. It was brought in as an option, a legitimate option to people taking cars. And by the way, these things are being imposed now before the Green Line's available, which is stunning to me, but that's a different issue. So, do I think that the solution is wrong? I personally don't like it, but I'm willing to say I might be the minority, and I agree we have to come up with something.
Right.
I just don't like this one. Right. And if I'm the only one who feels that way, if I'm in the minority, I'm willing to live with those consequences. I don't think it's right, and I am not willing to remain silent while it's imposed on me by faceless bureaucrats without even asking my opinion. And I don't mean just me, I mean me, the community. I don't think that's right. I never did it in 10 years. You can't think of one instance that I did it in 10 years. And I don't think it should be done now.
Okay, so I guess where I was going was just thinking about the dialogue that needs to occur and thinking about the balance that you need to do between older people who can't or don't choose to ride bicycles or don't feel comfortable, they don't feel safe, any number of reasons as you already decided. What do you do in that situation as you look at transportation and you look at the difficulties in putting in new public transit of any size and tunnels and all this infrastructure?
I'm not sure I know the answer. I really don't.
Okay,
I mean,
fair enough.
just because I don't have an answer doesn't mean I have to then accept yours.
Well,
And
in fairness, I will
it's
say...
like, I'm not sure. I'm happy to engage in the discussion. I'm happy to throw that serious, important, difficult question out to the general public in the communities involved, and then listen to their answers, whatever their answers are. I am not willing to impose my will on them, and I'm not willing to allow others to impose their will if I can help it. And that's the difference. And for me, it's not about the answer. It's not about the proposal, not about the change. It's about how you got there.
The process.
Where did that idea come from?
Well,
Did the people of Somerville go to the ballot and say, let's get rid of cars? Did they elect people who told them, when I get elected, I'm going to get rid of cars? Has anybody said that publicly? I'm
well,
not aware of it.
In fairness, I have to say, to pick up on the comment that
Other
was
than
made...
J.T. Scott.
It has
Have they
been
talked to
said...
the local businesses who are getting killed now?
Right, but...
And I don't know the answer to it. Have they talked to them who cannot get people into their stores? And all I'm saying, just because you don't have an answer, and I don't. And by the way, I don't know that this is the final solution to the whole world. It's a half a mile on Broadway. Is that going to change the world? Oh my God, the world is great now because we have a bus lane and a half a mile on Broadway. Come on. If you're going to be serious about a solution, it's got to be a regional-wide, statewide, national policy. I understand fully well that a lot of those things happen locally first, and they should.
Exactly.
If this bus lane went, I'm using this as an example, guys, so don't worry about the bus lane. If this went all the way to Sullivan Square, it would at least have a valuable argument. It has no argument when the city, by the way, just spent millions of dollars changing half of Broadway into a manner that can no longer accommodate 2 lanes of vehicles, so it is impossible at this point in time to have a bus lane on Lower Broadway. Am I wrong?
No, that's true.
And if they can't do it, get a half mile. Anybody here think that's going to change the world? I mean, really, do you think that's going to change the world? I don't.
In fairness, I think the idea is it's going to help improve traffic ridership time on a bus so that you'll feel
How
it's
much?
more efficient.
For a half a mile, how much? And by the way, those same buses, do you realize the traffic right now is being backed up? We're having some over here. Beyond Central Street?
Well, I think the thing that you should know is that, in fact, that they have to resynchronize the lights, which is
I
in
know all
progress
about
and
that.
such. And so
It's not gonna
so
change a
it's
thing.
an experiment in
It's
the works.
laughable.
But just looking at from a more generic point of view,
We got to get off the Somerville thing. Too many people have no idea what I'm talking about. All I'm saying, This is just an example. Do you solicit people's opinion before you impose your will on them? Or don't you? I argue that you should. Do you listen to that opinion before you impose it? I argue you should. And if you disagree, you should turn to people and say, thank you very much. I disagree with you for these reasons, and we're going to do it anyway. I don't have to like it, but at least it's reasonable. To not be asked, to not be informed, you're just generating anger, distrust, and the feeling that government doesn't care. And the stuff you do, city planners, you impact people directly. It's not some big healthcare system that you may not see the changes for a year or two. This is immediate and direct. People can see it, touch it, and feel it. I just think it's a matter of how you approach life. How do you approach government? How do you approach your role in the decision-making process?
And I hear what you're saying about sort of like a majority opinion on transportation planning or park planning, and I do agree with it to some extent, but I think that it's more than just imploring city planners and professionals to do that sort of engagement. The community needs to be open to educating themselves on the issues. And time again, I've seen that councilmen and community members, specifically older populations that are not up to speed with certain things like dedicated bus lanes that actually do work well, like in Cambridge. It's unfortunate what happened in Somerville.
They work great in Everett.
And there's hiccups, absolutely, to those implementations. But I think that they need to be open to educating themselves and not believing that just because they've lived in a place for this X amount of time, that they're right. Because most of the time, they're just uncomfortable with the changes. And it is what it is. But for the benefit of sustainability and things like that, I think that you're never going to have a fully equitable and, either representative or purely democratic, solution. So, I guess how do you reconcile that? And I would say that, as political leaders, whoever they are, they should be urging the community to come out to things and educate themselves so that they're not putting bugs in councilmen's ears so that they can get reelected, so that we don't actually put in bike lanes, we don't actually put in a new park or this or that, or actually increase density so that we can have more housing, so we can increase equity. I think that that's part of it too. So I think that just focusing on the professional side of it is not enough. I would say that people like you that represent a group of people need to urge them to educate themselves as well, because we can only do so much.
I agree with everything you just said, and I have to admit I'm focusing on you because it's an urban planning group.
Yeah, absolutely.
You get me in front of a bunch of city councils, I'm going to say the exact same thing, even more vociferously, because I think they have a bigger responsibility than you. And I totally agree with you 100%. And I guess let me put the caveat on it. I'm encouraging this, knowing full well that you will not be able to do it, knowing full well you are not the elected officials. And let me put parentheses in it. I'm suggesting this is the goal, and to do it to the best of your ability. And I couldn't agree with him more. The elected officials have a higher responsibility than you do. Yeah. They were elected to listen. They were elected to solicit opinions. And for those who don't, why do you think people hate government so much? This is one of the reasons. And they don't feel listened to. They don't feel respected. And I understand, you can only do so much. I totally agree with everything you just said, and I guess let me be clear. I want to apologize if if it came across I meant you should do it and others shouldn't. I'm just saying within the role that you play, do it to the best of your ability.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify. But then again, I told you at the beginning, some things I say I won't mean.
I have two questions. I'll make it short. So the first question is, what do you think of the impact of Airbnb on housing affordability, and how do you think you would balance the extra income it generated for homeowners, and also the extra services it generated for the users, but also the presumed pressure it has on the housing affordability?
Not an issue I had to struggle with as a mayor, but I think it's a valid issue. I don't know how to do it, and you're right. When a decision is made, or as decisions are made, I know some have already been made, people are going to have to look people in the eye and say, sorry, we're going to take some money out of your pocket, or prevent it from going in. The last I knew, the discussion was to disallow people from investing non-owner occupied buildings from doing it. You're an investor, I think it is a different class of people than an owner, than an owner-occupant. I don't know exactly where they've come in. They're going to change. This city will have this, that city will have that. The concept is right. I think Airbnb has denied cities tax revenue from hotel rooms, has been provided some degree of unfair competition for that, has changed neighborhoods to a certain extent, has attracted investors to buy units just for the purposes of renting them out. And not that any of that's illegal or immoral, but I do think it's a change in the way society has operated, and whenever significant changes like that happen, things like scooters, things like rental bikes, society has to take a deep breath and say, okay, we don't want to say no, but how do we deal with it? And I think that's what we're going through right now. I don't know that there's a good answer, but I do think it's a fair question. And I mean, I think it's a fair question for a community to ask itself, what should we do with it? I have faith that that'll be balanced out as we go along. Just like I think all these other things are getting worked out. Uber is getting worked out, and eventually, I don't know if the scooters have been worked out yet, but they'll get worked out. And people want it, and they're going to get it. But I do think it has to be done or should be done in a thoughtful manner to the best of your ability. And by the way, let me be real clear. On things like this, government is always behind. Government is always behind because that's not what government does. Government deals with the present. How do I deal with the problems I have today? They're not there. I mean, they're nice, but they don't have any crystal ball to know what the problems of tomorrow are going to be. And all of a sudden, somebody comes up with this smart idea of Airbnb, and they say, again, sounds good for the first guy. Who cares if one guy in the neighborhood's doing it? Now, all of a sudden, 6 houses in the neighborhood have sold. They've all sold to foreign investors, and they're all jamming 85 people in there a day. People throwing trash all over the street and having parties till 2 a.m. It's like, wait a minute. Maybe we need to take a deep breath and reconsider this. And I think Airbnb is one of those. Again, I don't know that there's an answer at the moment. I know that different cities are struggling with different answers. There will be probably a hodgepodge of answers depending on the community. But they will address it because there are some problems in some neighborhoods, not in every neighborhood.
Yeah, so one more question. So you said we have to consider conflicting interest and also be honest and outspoken about our point of view and ideas. So could you give us some examples that you balanced your own vision or any vision that you have with the conflict interest and ideas that other peoples and the communities have?
I'll give you a lot of them, then I'm very comfortable. I'll give you one I lost. How about that? The city of Somerville, like any other city, creates a lot of trash and has to pay a lot of money to get rid of that trash. We instituted a recycling program years ago. You guys now take it for granted. We were one of the first to do it. We were one of the first to do curbside. We were one of the first to do mixed stuff. It still generates a lot of trash, costs a lot of money, no matter how you look at it. And I made a proposal at the time to build a MRF, Materials Recycling Facility. And the idea was if you built a new one to current modern standards, you could have all kinds of air scrubbers and all kinds of sound deadening things. We all create trash. It has to go somewhere. And we thought we had a location that was far enough away from any residential use. And the city would make money. The city would make money because other cities had to do the same thing. They would pay to be able to use this facility. We wouldn't have made a lot, but it was a fair amount of money. And so I thought it was a good idea. I put it in front of the city council, I got croaked. They didn't like the idea of bringing trash in from other cities. Like, it's recyclables. What do you think? Our trash goes someplace. We don't have a trash facility in somewhere. We just had a transfer station. I got croaked because there was no willingness to discuss the issue. It was a knee-jerk reaction and for political purposes, and so what? It happened. So sometimes even when you're trying to be reasonable or trying to be proactive and responsible, it doesn't always work out that way. One more than I lost, but things change. Right now, we had a provision in the zoning ordinance that prohibited people from cutting up the handful. There's only a handful of significantly, big parcels of land that had 2 and 3 family houses on it, and big parcels, and some of it was 10,000, 15,000 square feet, not 20 acres. And the reason was because, again, we were already a densely populated city. At the time, we didn't like the idea of you coming in, buying a house, and then dropping a 2-family house in the backyard. And it had happened. We stopped it. And that has now changed again. The city got rid of that, and it's happening all over the place. Things change. I don't know what's good. I don't know what's right, but the desires of the community change over time. So it's a never-ending discussion. It's a never-ending battle. It's a never-ending compromise. What do you think life should be like? And if I don't agree with you, we either fight and one of us wins or loses, or we try to find a deal. Can't always find a deal. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you have to want to find a deal. I have to be honest. I was surprised nobody wanted to find a deal on a recycling facility. I was a little surprised. I was shocked, actually, especially by the people who opposed it. But it happens. So it's not about examples. It'll never stop. It never should stop. Your life is going to be different than mine. Your neighborhood's going to be different than mine. Your needs and desires and wants are going to be different than mine. You're going to want scooters at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm not. And does that mean they shouldn't happen because I'm in control at the moment? No. The answer is, when it's your turn, you want scooters, you get scooters. You want high-rise buildings? Fine. But the city has to want high-rise buildings. There's always somebody who wants a higher building or a lower building. It's always going to happen. In every neighborhood in this country, in the world, people who have different visions for the exact same neighborhood. Nothing wrong with that. It's good. You have the debate, have the discussion, you elect people that reflect that vision, and things change. Or they don't. And there are some communities that don't change. I don't think that's good. You can't build a wall across the city and never change. Some people think you can. Those are usually the communities that get left behind. I'll give you one that kind of is proof positive. I got elected to the city council in 1977. 1978, Somerville runs a border with Cambridge, right on Beacon Street. Most of Beacon Street's in Somerville, some of it's in Cambridge. In 1978, somebody on Beacon Street, some professor at Harvard, they found out he was doing biochemical engineering in his garage. True story. The neighborhood went bananas. They thought there was going to be 3-headed monsters climbing up out of the sewers to come get them. The city of Somerville immediately, within a month, passed an ordinance prohibiting bio in Somerville. Probably illegal, but for any developer, planners, there's a cost-benefit analysis. So a developer comes along and says, I could probably beat this in court, but it's going to take me 2 years, and if I go to Medford or go someplace else, I can get this done now. Somerville got no biotech for 30 years. None. Yeah, and I'm not saying, again, whether it's good or bad, how do you plan for that? And by the way, I have to be honest, I was one of 2 votes against that ordinance. And I didn't even know what the hell biotech was. It's like, yeah, it's science. Yeah, maybe he shouldn't be flushing it down the sewers. Okay, fine. But maybe there's like a compromise we could come up with, no flushing. But can't compromise that one. But that's a true story. Yeah.
So City Council and Michelle Wu just proposed abolishing the BPDA.
Yeah, I saw that.
It comes up every now and again, but wondering what your thoughts are.
It's ridiculous. You want to change the makeup of it. You want to change how they get appointed. You want to get changed who they're responsible to. Go ahead. Somebody has to do the planning. And somebody has to do the interpretation of zoning. And, you can argue about who they should be responsible to. I think that's the argument here. It's the nut of the argument of who they answer to. That's a fair question. That's a governmental question. But abolishing it, I guarantee you if they abolish it, first of all, nothing will get done in the city. And second of all, within a matter of a second, they'll come up with something else that's doing it with a different name. You know, the classic example, anybody, again, you're not old enough. We used to have the Metropolitan District Commission that had the parks and stuff. Oh, well, and they were always in trouble. They were always doing stupid stuff. It was a political dumping ground, all kinds of things. So they had a big reform 10, 15, 20 years ago. They changed the name from MDC to DCR. Literally, they went out to the vehicles, scraped off the M, and added an R on the vehicle. This, God's honest truth. I can show you the vehicles. Like, nothing changed except the name. This is one of those proposals. It's like, look, I get it. Look, I personally think the Boston Planning Department has a little too much authority, personally, from what I see. I'm not involved in it, but you know, I understand that. That's fair. Abolishing it, that's not a responsible answer. That's a knee-jerk answer that feel good. But who's going to do this work? Who's then going to say what you can build on your parcel? Nobody? Or everybody? Here's the answer. Either you can't do anything or you can do whatever you want. Come on. Not a responsible answer, not in my opinion. That doesn't mean the bottom line of the concern is not a legitimate concern. That's a fair question, and I don't even have a real strong opinion on it because I don't know the details of how they work. Do you think it's a good idea?
I mean, they've already gone through one rebranding, right? So, I mean, they definitely need more oversight by the city government, but because they operate too autonomously as it is, and plus they just had that scandal where the guy took $50,000 bribe to rezone someone's property.
Bribes to zoning officials. Gee, how unusual. Never heard that before.
Yeah, it's going to come out somewhere.
What else we got?
One more.
All right.
Thank you so much.
I had fun.